Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching Real Talk. I am so glad you're here. I'm your host, Claudia Ellis of Claudia's Decor. Whether you're joining me live this morning, catching the replay later this afternoon, listening while you're working in your craft room, driving on the road, or maybe you're folding laundry with me playing in the background, I'm just grateful you decided to spend a little bit of your day with me. Every single week, we come together to have conversations that I wish more people were having. Not conversations that make us feel guilty, not conversations that tell us to simply work harder or want it more. We have conversations about things that happen in the middle of building something, the thoughts that keep us awake at night, the struggles that can make us wonder if we're the only ones feeling this way. And if you've been around Real Talk for any length of time, you already know this isn't a place where I pretend to have everything figured out. This is where I come and share what I'm learning while I'm learning it. Sometimes I get it right. Sometimes I learn the lesson the hard way. Every week I try to take whatever I'm walking through and ask myself one question. If this helped me, maybe it will help somebody else too. I don't believe I'm the only one walking this road. I think that thousands of us are. People building businesses after work, people creating late at night after the kids go to bed, people trying to figure out social media, marketing, pricing, confidence, comparison, fear, consistency, and everything in between. People who are chasing a dream that nobody but them really understands. And sometimes that can feel lonely. That's why Real Talk matters to me. Not because I think I'm some expert standing on a stage, but because I know what it feels like to sit in your craft room, look around at everything you've been working on, and quietly ask yourself, am I doing this right? Today's conversation actually started because of something that happened to me this week. It wasn't some huge life-changing event. It wasn't something I read in a business book. It wasn't something a coach told me. It was one simple question somebody asked me. So, how have you been? And before I had a chance to think about it, before I really processed what they were asking me, my answer came out almost automatically. Oh my goodness, I've just been so busy. Have you ever noticed how quickly that answer comes? It's almost like it's programmed into us. We stop and think. We don't ask ourselves how we're really doing. We don't talk about whether we're excited, discouraged, hopeful, frustrated, or encouraged. We just say, I've been busy. The conversation moved on, and honestly, I didn't think much about it in the moment. But later that day, I couldn't get those words out of my head. You ever done this? Has that ever happened to you? Somebody says something, or maybe you say something, and hours later you're still thinking about it? You're making dinner and your brain goes back to it. You're cleaning up your workspace and it comes back again. You're driving somewhere and suddenly you're replaying the conversation. That's exactly what happened to me, because the more I thought about it, the more I realized something and honestly caught me off guard. They didn't ask me if I was busy. They asked me how I was doing. Those are two completely different questions. One question is about my schedule. The other question is about me. One question is asking what filled my calendar. The other question is asking what filled my heart. One question is asking about my activity. The other question is asking about my life. And somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, I started answering both questions exactly the same. That bothered me. Not because being busy is bad. Let's settle that right now before anybody misunderstands where this conversation is going. I'm not standing here today to tell you that being busy is wrong. Life is busy. Running a business is busy. Being a spouse is busy. Being a parent is absolutely busy. Working a full-time job while trying to build a dream on the side is busy. There are seasons where life naturally asks more of us. So this isn't one of those conversations where I'm going to tell you that if you would just wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, meditate for 30 minutes, journal for 20 minutes, drink a green smoothie, and magically eliminate everything from your calendar, life will suddenly become easy. That's not real life. It's certainly not my life. And I'm guessing it's probably not yours either. Hi, Miss Sarah. This conversation is about something much deeper than having a full calendar. It's about asking ourselves whether the things filling our calendar are actually building the future we're praying for. Because I don't think those two things are automatically the same. I started replaying my own week in my head. I answered messages, I responded to comments, I checked Etsy, I worked on graphics, I cleaned part of my workspace, I moved inventory around, I researched a couple of ideas, I watched some training, I handled emails, I took phone calls, I crossed things off my list all day long. If somebody had looked at me from the outside, they would have said, wow, she's working really hard. And they would have been right. I was. But then another question came into my mind, one that I honestly wasn't prepared to answer. What actually moved forward? Not what kept me occupied, not what helped me feel productive, not what allowed me to check another box, but what actually moved the business closer to where I believe God is leading it. I sat there for a minute because those two very different questions, I started realizing that some of the things I had spent the most time doing weren't necessarily wrong. They just weren't the things that actually moved the needle. Now, please hear my heart. I'm not saying those tasks don't matter. They do. Businesses need administration. Businesses need organization. Businesses need customer service. Businesses need behind the scenes work. The problem isn't when we do those things. The problem is when those things quietly become the center of our day, while the things that actually build the business keep getting pushed off till tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. And before we know it, we've spent months working incredibly hard without ever stopping to ask ourselves one simple question. Busy building what? Not busy doing what, busy building what? Because every single thing we do is building something. Some activities build our confidence. Some activities build our knowledge. Some activities build relationships. And some activities build our business. And if we're really honest, some activities simply build the illusion that we're making progress. I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning trying to waste time. I don't think anybody watching today says, you know what? I hope I spend 8 hours accomplishing absolutely nothing. That's not who we are. Most of us are doing the very best we know how to do. We're showing up. We're trying. We're learning. We're praying. We're investing. We're sacrificing. We're hoping. Good morning, Miss Rachel. So if that's true, why do so many of us still end our day completely exhausted and quietly wondering why it feels like we're standing in the exact same place? I don't think the answer is because we're lazy, and I don't think the answer is that we need to work harder. Thank you for the heart, me. I think the answer may be much closer than that. I think we've quietly started believing that being busy automatically means we're building something meaningful. And my question today is, what if those are two completely different things? What if the question that still feels uncomfortable is because deep down We already know the answer. You're very smiley. You must have no kids. I have two daughters. I have two daughters, and one happens to be getting married. So no, I have kids. They're grown and flown. I'm very smiley. Thank you. Thank you for the compliment. All right, I know. Let's get back to the question. What if the reason the question feels a little uncomfortable is because deep down we already know the answer? I know that was true for me. Not because I was doing anything wrong, not because I wasn't working hard, not because I wasn't committed, but because I realized I'd gotten into a rhythm that looked productive from the outside while quietly distracting me from the work that actually mattered. And here's what I want to say before we go any further. This isn't just about business. I know we talk a lot about business on Real Talk because that's the journey many of us are on together. But what we're really talking about today is stewardship of our lives, because this doesn't just happen in our business. It happens in our homes. It happens in our relationships. It happens in our faith. It happens in every area where activity can become a substitute for intentionality. You can spend all day long doing things for your family and still never be present with your family. You can spend all day answering emails and never answer one that's actually important. You can spend hours working on your business and never do the things or the one thing that would actually help your business grow. It's amazing how easy it is to fill a day. It is much harder to build one on purpose. And I think that's where many of us get stuck, because somewhere along the way, we started measuring our days by how full they were instead of how fruitful they were. Think about the conversations we have with each other. How's business? Oh, I've just been slammed. How are things going? Oh, I've been so busy. How's life? I haven't had a minute to breathe. We almost wear exhaustion like it's a badge of honor, not because we're trying to impress anybody. It's just become normal. It's become our language. It's become our culture. Have you ever noticed that if someone asks how your business is doing and you say, you know what, things have actually been pretty peaceful, people almost don't know what to do with that answer. It's almost like peace sounds suspicious. Busy sounds successful. Peace sounds lazy. Isn't that interesting? Somewhere we accepted this unwritten rule that if we're overwhelmed, overbooked, behind on everything, answering messages at 11 o'clock at night, and constantly saying, I'm trying to catch up, then we must be doing something right. But who made that rule? Seriously, who decided that? Because I don't remember signing the agreement. Yet somehow I find myself living by it. Maybe you have too. I started thinking about my own business. There have been days where I sat down at my desk first thing in the morning, looked at my to-do list, and before I even started working, I already felt behind. Nothing had gone wrong. Nobody had called with an emergency. Nothing was on fire. I simply looked at a list and immediately felt pressure. Why? Because the list was long. And somehow in my mind, a long list meant it was important. I was important. A long list meant that I was needed. A long list meant that I was making progress. But here's what I've learned. A long list doesn't necessarily mean you're moving forward. Sometimes it just means you've become really good at collecting tasks. Ouch. That one hit me because I'm really good at collecting tasks. Anybody else? You finish one thing, you add 3 more things. You're checking something off, you remember two things you forgot. You organize one area and suddenly you've discovered 5 more projects that need your attention. It's like our brains are constantly scanning for the next thing. And before long, we're living in reaction instead of intention. We're no longer deciding what deserves our attention. Everything is competing for it. Social media wants it. Email wants it. Customers want it. Notifications want it. Our own ideas want it. Let's be honest, sometimes our craft room wants it. Michelle, I'm really good at lists. You and I are one and the same, Claudia. I know. Love and Glitter Designs. Hi, Claudia. Sorry I missed the beginning. What are you reading? I'm reading my script for my Real Talk today. This is something I wrote and sharing with you guys. It's what I call Real Talk. So engage as much as you would like because I am reading comments. I hope you're enjoying. All right, you walk in thinking you're going to finish one wreath, and 20 minutes later, you're reorganizing ribbon that didn't need to be reorganized. Tell me I'm not the only one. I know I'm not the only one. You convince yourself you're being productive. I'm getting organized. And organization has its place. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not against organization. I'm against using organization as a hiding place because sometimes we organize because it's easier than selling. We redesign our logo because it's easier than going live. We clean our office because it's easier than making the phone call we've been avoiding. We watch another YouTube video because it's easier than listing another product. We convince ourselves we're preparing when the truth is we're postponing. Right, Carly? Now, let me be careful here because I don't want anyone hearing condemnation. That's not my heart. I've done every single thing I just mentioned, every one of them. I've spent an hour fixing something that nobody else ever noticed because it felt productive. Meanwhile, the one thing that would have actually grown my business sat untouched. Why? Because the important work is often uncomfortable work. Making the video is uncomfortable. Going live is uncomfortable. Asking for the sale is uncomfortable. Sending the email is uncomfortable. Trying something new, let's face it, is uncomfortable. So our brains naturally drift toward the task that feels safe. Right, Sarah? It's true. Going live is uncomfortable, right? And here's the sneaky part. Those safe tasks still feel like work. So we don't even realize we're avoiding the bigger thing. We're busy enough to silence our conscience. Think about that for a minute, okay? If I sat on the couch all day watching television, I know I wasn't working. Okay, so there's no confusion there. But if I spend 8 hours color coding folders, reorganizing supplies, tweaking graphics for the 5th time, or endlessly researching without taking action, I can tell myself I worked all day. And technically I did. But did I build anything? That's the question. Did today's work create tomorrow's opportunities? Or did today's work simply keep me occupied? These are two very different outcomes. I think that's why this topic has been sitting so heavily on my heart this week, because I don't believe we're struggling with laziness. I believe we're struggling with clarity. Most of us aren't afraid of hard work. We'll work ourselves into the ground. We'll stay up late. We'll wake up early. We'll sacrifice weekends. We'll give everything we've got. The question isn't whether we're willing to work. The question is, are we working on the right things? Because if you climb a ladder with all of your strength, but it's leaning against the wrong wall, working harder didn't solve the problem. It just gets you to the wrong destination faster. The thought stopped me in my tracks, not because I think my ladder is against the wrong wall, but because it forced me to ask, am I climbing intentionally, or am I climbing because climbing feels productive? And there is a difference. I think that's where we begin to shift our perspective. Instead of waking up asking, what all do I have to get done today? Maybe we begin asking, what actually deserves my best energy today? Okay, those aren't the same question. One creates motion, the other creates direction. And if there's one thing I've learned over the past few years building Claudia's door decor, it's this: motion is easy. Direction takes courage, because direction forces you to choose. It forces you to say no to good ideas so you can say yes to the best ones. It forces you to stop confusing activity with achievement. I think that's one of the hardest lessons for creators to learn, because we're idea people. We see possibilities everywhere. We could make this, we could launch that, we could start another project, we could redesign something, we could create another product line. Our creativity is one of our greatest gifts. But if we're not careful, it can also become one of our greatest distractions. And I say that with a smile, because nobody understands that better than I do. My brain can come up with 50 ideas before breakfast. The challenge has never been having ideas. The challenge has always been deciding which one deserves my attention today. Because every yes costs something. Usually it costs time. And time is one thing none of us gets back. So maybe the goal isn't to become less busy. Maybe the goal is to become more intentional. Because a full calendar doesn't necessarily mean you're building a meaningful life. A busy business doesn't necessarily mean you're building a profitable business. And checking off 20 boxes doesn't necessarily mean you accomplished the one thing that mattered most. Maybe, just maybe, the most productive thing we can do isn't adding something else to our schedule. Maybe it's finally getting honest enough to ask ourselves, if I keep spending my days exactly like this, where will I be a year from now? I challenge you to ask yourself that. That question isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to wake you up. Because I don't know about you, but there have been moments in my life where I looked up and thought, how did I get here? Not in a dramatic way like, YOLO, not like that. Nothing catastrophic has happened. I hadn't made some terrible decision. Life had just happened. One day rolled into the next. One project became another project. One week became another week, and before I knew it, months had gone by. Have you ever had that moment where you look at the calendar and think, how is it already August? Or, how are we already talking about Christmas? Guys, today's the last day of July, and we did Christmas in July. And how is it already over? How is July already over? It feels like we were just packing away the Christmas decorations, and now the stores are putting them back out again. Time has a funny way of doing that. It doesn't usually disappear in big chunks. It slips away in ordinary Tuesdays, in quick trips to the grocery store, in I'll do that tomorrow, in one more scroll through social media, in one more email, in one more thing that seems harmless all by itself. And that's what makes this conversation so important. because we rarely lose our dreams all at once. We lose them a little at a time, not because we stopped caring, not because we quit, but because we got distracted by the things that felt urgent. There is a difference between urgent and important, but our brains don't always recognize it. Urgent screams, important whispers. Urgent demands our attention right now. Important patiently waits for you to make room for it. An email notification, hold on a second, is urgent. A customer message feels urgent. A Facebook notification feels urgent. A laundry buzzer is urgent. Your phone ringing is urgent. But sitting down to plan the future of your business, that usually isn't urgent. Creating a long-term strategy, not urgent. Learning a new skill that will actually increase your income, not urgent. Building systems that save you hours every week, not urgent. Having a hard conversation you've been avoiding, not urgent. And because they aren't screaming, they're often the very thing that get pushed to tomorrow. And here's what I find fascinating. Hi, Miss Emily. Your brain knows that deserves your attention. But if I told you there are tiny cracks in your foundation that would eventually become major problems, most people would say, I'll deal with that later. Why? Have you guys heard the saying, that's tomorrow's problem? Hi, Carly. Thanks for being on Facebook. Have you ever heard that that's tomorrow's problem? That can actually be detrimental to what you're doing today. Why? Because it doesn't feel urgent. The danger isn't immediate. And I think we do the same thing in business. We wait until there's a crisis before we make a change. Sales slow down, then we panic. We run out of inventory, then we scramble. We realize our bookkeeping is behind. Then we spend an entire weekend trying to catch up. Our email list hasn't been touched in 6 months. And suddenly we're trying to build one overnight. Hi, Miss Cassie. We've all done it. I know I have. And while sometimes life simply throws us curveballs, I also wonder how many of our emergencies were actually whispers that we ignored for months. Again, that's not condemnation, that's awareness. There's a difference. Condemnation says, you should have known better. Awareness says, now that you see it, you can choose differently. That's one of the reasons I love these conversations, because awareness changes things, not overnight, not magically, but it changes the questions we've been asking ourselves. Instead of asking what has to get done today, maybe we start asking what keeps getting pushed aside. The question that convicted me more than once, because if I'm honest, the things that have the greatest potential to move my business forward are often the things that require the most courage. Hey, Miss Kelly. It's easier to answer comments than it is to record a video. It's easier to it's easier to reorganize ribbon than it is to write a sales email. Guys, are you fans of selling? Like, does that come naturally to you? Does it seem unnatural to you to ask for sales or to put yourself out there and say, hey, I have this available? Like, a lot of us aren't naturally salespeople. So that feels like something we can avoid. Or what's the most non-evasive way that I can put my products out there so that somebody may happen to see it and may want it? So we talk ourselves out of doing the things that make us uncomfortable. It's easier to watch another tutorial than it is to publish the listing you've been overthinking for 2 weeks. Can we talk about overthinking for a minute? Gosh, I am so guilty of this. I don't think overthinking gets enough attention. We often treat it like it's just part of having a creative mind. I'm just thinking it through. I'm making sure it's right. I want to be prepared. And sometimes that's true. Preparation is wise, but there's a line, and sometimes we cross it without realizing it. Michelle says selling is definitely a confidence issue, especially with handmade products, right? Kelly, yep, overthinking equals stagnation. Absolutely. Loving glitter designs. I've read that overthinking is a trauma response. Yes. And so is procrastination. It is a trauma response. Preparation eventually becomes procrastination wearing a very convincing disguise. Oof. I've lived there. Maybe you have too. You tell yourself you're still gathering information. You tell yourself you're almost ready. You tell yourself you'll start after one more class, one more book, one more video, one more tweak, one more adjustment, and suddenly 6 months have passed. The funny thing is we rarely notice it while it's happening. It's the fear of no one will like it. Right, Emily? Right? Our minds reward preparation. It feels productive. You walk away thinking, I accomplished something today. But let me ask you something. Have you ever watched someone build a beautiful front porch? They lay the foundation, they measure, they cut, they level everything. Preparation matters. But imagine if they spent the next 3 years measuring every day, checking the level, rechecking the measurements, buying better tools, watching videos about porch construction, talking to other builders, reading books about architecture. At some point, you'd probably look at them and say, the porch isn't going to build itself. Not because preparation wasn't important, because preparation was never meant to become the destination. It was meant to lead to action. Some of us have accidentally built businesses that are permanently preparing. We prepared to launch. We prepare to go live. We prepare to raise our prices. We prepare to start a YouTube. We prepare to open an Etsy. We're preparing to build the website, preparing to ask for help, preparing to become visible. Preparing. Can I lovingly say something? Your future can't respond to preparation. It responds to action, imperfect action, messy action, sometimes awkward action, sometimes even embarrassing action. The kind of action where you look back a year later and laugh because you can't believe you actually posted that first video. The kind of action where your first product photos make you cringe because you've grown so much since then. The kind of action where you realize your first live wasn't polished, but it was real. And because it was real, it moved you forward. That's the thing about movement. It teaches you things that thinking never can. Think about riding a bicycle all day long, reading books about balance, watching videos, study the mechanics. But eventually I have to get on the bike. I'm probably going to wobble. I might even fall, but I won't learn balance by standing beside the bicycle admiring it. The same is true about your business. You learn pricing by pricing. You learn marketing by marketing. You learn selling by selling. Hi, Miss Tracy. You learn confidence by showing up before you feel confident. And that's the part we don't always like, because we'd rather feel ready first. Wouldn't that be nice? To wake up one morning and suddenly feel completely confident, completely qualified, completely fearless. I don't know about many entrepreneurs who have experienced that. Most of the ones I admire didn't become confident and then take action. They took action, and confidence quietly followed them over time. Maybe that's backwards from the way we've been thinking. Maybe confidence isn't the prerequisite. Maybe it's the reward. And if that's true, only doing the thing you've been avoiding can do it for you. Which brings me back to something I asked myself. What did I get done today? And changed it to, what did I avoid today? Sometimes you get more answers about where you're going by answering what you've been avoiding. And that is harder to answer. Avoidance doesn't always look like avoidance. Sometimes it looks incredibly responsible, productive, and we don't notice it. It just might become the beginning of real progress. The goal isn't to have a day that feels full. The goal is to have a day that quietly moves you one step closer to the life, the business, and the person you're becoming. And sometimes that one brave step is worth more than 100 comfortable tasks. What I find interesting is most of us can tell you exactly what we did yesterday, but we have a much harder time telling you what we accomplished. Think about that for just a second. If I asked you, what did you do yesterday? You'd probably have no problem answering, because we all have emails. You ship orders, you made dinner, you ran errands, you cleaned the house, you worked on a wreath, you posted on Facebook, you paid bills, you took the dog to the vet, you picked up the kids. We can list our activities all day long, but then ask yourself a different question. What actually changed because of what I did yesterday? What actually changed? Activity leaves footprints. Progress leaves results, and the two don't always walk together. The biggest lies we've quickly accepted is this: if I'm tired, I must have had a productive day. Have you ever caught yourself saying that? I'm exhausted. Almost like exhaustion is proof that the day counted. There are absolutely days where you're tired because you accomplished something incredible. I've had those days. You've probably had those days too. You finished a project. You completed a launch. You decorated for an event. At the end of the day, you're tired. You built something with your own hands, but there's also a deep sense of satisfaction. And that's a good tired. There's purpose attached to that. Then there's another kind of tired, the kind where you collapse into bed and think, what did I even do today? You've had those days. I've had those days. You're exhausted. But if someone asked you what you accomplished, you almost struggle to answer. You stayed busy. You never sat down, but somehow the day disappeared. That's a frustrating feeling for an entrepreneur. It's not because you're lazy. It's not because you wasted the day. Your energy went somewhere, but you can't figure out where. Those days are hard. I have been, the last few months, planning and creating things for my daughter's wedding. It's been exhausting. It's been a lot of work. I'm so grateful for the trust that my daughter had in me to make these items. I've never done a wedding before. So I've gotten to make her bouquet, the bridesmaids' bouquets, the centerpieces. I'm still waiting for my husband to build the arch to do the arch florals. I made floral chandeliers. I had never even in my life thought about making a floral chandelier, but I did it. And I've been busy and I've been tired. But if I'm honest, it hasn't done anything great for my business. Not because I can't now use this wedding to make pieces for weddings and include that in my business, but what have I done with it? See, this is where these conversations from. They come from the struggles that I'm having, the season that I'm in, the questions that I ask, and I know I'm not the only one. So I'm hoping that this is resonating with a lot of you, because I know that we all go through these seasons where our focus needs to shift slightly in order to move forward in the things that we're trying to do, especially for our loved ones, you know? All right. Most of us didn't start our business because we wanted another job. We started because we wanted freedom. Freedom to create, freedom to make an income doing something we love, freedom to spend time with our families, freedom to have flexibility, freedom to build something meaningful. But somewhere along the way, if we're not careful, we accidentally build ourselves another full-time job. Only this one doesn't come with a paid vacation or a guaranteed income or something else telling us what matters most today. Not everything depends on us. And that's both exciting and dangerous, because when nobody tells you what to do, everything starts feeling important. Everything starts waving its arms saying, pick me. And if you don't have clarity, you'll spend your entire day responding to whatever yelled the loudest. Michelle says, what a special moment for you, Claudia. Designing centerpieces and decor is admirable. I appreciate that, Michelle, and I can't wait to show everybody how it's all going to come together and how it'll look together. What I didn't expect is to actually be helping planning the wedding as well, but it's been an experience. Now let's get back to responding to what yells the loudest. You sit down to plan and you tell yourself you're going to list 3 new products today. That's the goal. You have your coffee, you're ready. You open your computer, then you notice an email. I'll answer this real quick. 5 minutes, no big deal. Then you remember you need to reorder supplies. While you're doing that, you notice another message. Then Facebook tells you someone commented, and then Etsy has a notification. Then your phone buzzes. Then someone texts you. Then you realize you're hungry. Then the laundry needs to go into the dryer. I'm exhausted just reading this. Then the laundry needs to go into the dryer. Then your spouse asks you a question. And then the cat pukes. If you're a pet owner, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Life has a way of interrupting life. And suddenly it's 2:30 in the afternoon. You sit back in your chair and you realize I never listed 3 products. Nothing terrible happened. Life just kept giving you tiny little directions. That's why I don't believe distraction is usually one big dramatic event. I think distraction is death by 1,000 tiny decisions. None of them seem significant by themselves. Answering one email isn't a problem. Checking one notification isn't a problem. Looking something up isn't a problem, but stack 100 tiny little interruptions together and suddenly the most important work never happens. Let me read what Anissa said over on Facebook. I did my first market yesterday afternoon. Nothing came of it. Not a busy market. Small town and schools open. House was yesterday, but I stepped out of my comfort zone and put my work out in the public. Anissa, congratulations. Congratulations. I am so incredibly proud of you. And now you can say you've done it and you learned. You learned from it. I'm so proud. Everybody give her a high five, a yippee, a congratulations. She posted it all over on Facebook. So when you get a chance, go give her some congratulations because that deserves it. All right, so let's picture when you were younger, okay? I used to think that leaks, like plumbing leaks, were obvious. You'd see water pouring out of a pipe. That's a leak. But homeowners know better than that. Sometimes the most expensive leaks are the ones no one ever sees. They're hidden inside the wall. Drip, drip, drip. You don't hear it. You don't notice it. Nothing looks wrong until one day you discover thousands of dollars in damage that happen one tiny drop at a time. How many dreams are leaking away like that? Not because somebody quit, not because somebody failed, but because tiny distractions quietly stole years from them. That thought gets my attention. I don't want to look back 5 years from now and realize I wasn't defeated. I was distracted. Defeat says I couldn't. Distraction says I never stayed focused long enough. And that's actually within my control. I started doing this recently. Instead of ending my day asking, what did I get done today? I started asking, what moved the mission? Not what moved the list, the mission. Because the list is endless. And we can all agree on that. Our lists that we make constantly are like laundry. It's never ending. Laundry just doesn't stop happening one day. I think I remember somebody, and it made me laugh so hard because I thought about this, like logically, right? She actually said that she would be thrilled if she never had to do laundry again and clothes became disposable. Think about that. What if clothes became disposable? Would you do it? Would you actually buy disposable clothes so you never had to do laundry? It's interesting. You're never going to wake up one morning and think, well, I did it. There's nothing left to do. If you own a business, that day is never coming. There will always be another email, another product, an idea, a customer, an opportunity, a problem to solve, post to create. That list doesn't end. So if your satisfaction depends on finishing the list, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Instead, what if your satisfaction came from knowing you invested your energy where it mattered most? That's a different way of measuring the day. Maybe I didn't finish everything, but I finished the most important thing. Maybe I didn't answer every message before lunch, but I finally recorded the video I've been putting off for 3 weeks. Maybe the office isn't perfectly organized, but I listed the products that can actually generate income. Maybe the ribbon bins are still a mess, but I had the conversation I've been avoiding. Do you see the shift? It's subtle, but it's powerful. We're moving from asking, did I stay busy, to asking, did I stay aligned? Because alignment creates momentum. Busyness just creates movement, and momentum is an amazing thing. Once you've experienced it, you realize how different it feels. Momentum doesn't always feel fast. Sometimes it's surprisingly quiet. Sometimes momentum looks like consistently doing one meaningful thing. I really need to stop adding so many big words. But I am reading my own words. Sometimes momentum looks like consistently doing meaningful things every single day. Okay, nothing flashy, nothing viral, just faithful progress day after day, week after week, month after month. It's kind of like planting a garden. You don't plant seeds on Monday and harvest tomatoes on Friday. Wouldn't that be nice though? You plant, you water, you wait, you pull weeds, you you protect what you planted. And for a while, it almost feels like nothing is happening. But underneath the surface, roots are growing, strength is developing, something is happening that your eyes can't see. Business is a lot like that. Sometimes the work that feels the slowest is actually laying the strongest foundation. But here's the catch. You have to keep planting. If every day you dig up yesterday's seed because you didn't see immediate results, you'll never experience the harvest. And I wonder if some of us are doing exactly that. We try something for a week and nothing happens, so we quit. We try another platform, nothing happens, so we quit. We try another product, nothing happens, so we quit. But nothing that you quit will ever have the chance to grow. You have to give things that you plant time to grow. You have to make sure that you allow things to grow. Algorithms change. Platforms change. The things that you were once able to do, you can no longer do. The things that you once found were fun and enjoyable will change. You have to get comfortable in the change. It's necessary to continue to grow. Relationships won't always look the same. Just like anything else in life, things have to be allowed to change. It's a lot like opening doors and closing doors, okay? Opportunities will come. Doors will open. Things will happen that you didn't predict or you didn't know were going to happen. Your business all of a sudden takes a turn that you were not expecting. And if you don't follow it, if you don't use it where your business is naturally going, then those doors are going to start to close. Those opportunities are going to go away. So be mindful. Make sure that your best yes is being given. And it's okay. Give yourself permission to say no. It's okay to say no. No is a complete sentence. You don't have to make an excuse. You don't have to you don't have to think that everything is permanent. Just because you can't do something today, it doesn't make sense for your business today. Make sure you leave that door open. Make sure you say, I am not ready for that now. Please check back in with me. Okay? Don't close doors simply because you can't walk through it right now. That's important. So important. We just don't realize everything isn't the right thing right now. Sometimes things that don't make sense right now for you or for your business, there's a reason for that. There is an absolute reason that it's not right for you right now, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to be good for you somewhere in the future. So remember to open doors and leave doors open where you think you might end up in the future or you're going that way, because let me tell you something, a blessing too soon can actually hurt your business. Something happening or you forcing something too soon can actually hurt your business. I hope that makes sense. We've talked a lot about how the things that we do for our business can keep us busy. but it doesn't necessarily move us forward. So therefore, it is not profitable. So my challenge to you is to look around, see what you can do in a week's time that will actually make you profitable, because that is what's going to keep you in the game. If you're consistently working and pushing forward and not seeing results, that wears on you. I've seen a lot of people destashing. They're done. They're done with the business. And I get that. I understand it. Okay? But what I'm telling you is, just because you have a slow season, or in my case, I'm busy with other things this season, doesn't mean that you can't do something. Give yourself a week that will move the needle forward, whether it be creating a new item and listing it, that moves the needle forward. Whether it's learning a new skill, that moves the needle forward. You have to invest in your businesses. You need to invest in your businesses. Okay? Now, I'm going to talk about focusing on followers and focusing on all the things that keep us working for the numbers. When you strip away all the numbers and all the followers and all the sales and all the algorithms, didn't we start all of this, all of our business, to make a difference? I know I did. I wanted to sell wreaths. Of course, I wanted customers and I wanted my business to grow. But what I've always loved isn't the transaction, it's the transformation. I love hearing someone say, I smile every time I pull into my driveway. Your wreath made my house feel like a home. This was exactly what I needed after everything we've been through. Those moments remind me that I'm not just shipping products. I'm sending something that's going to be part of someone's story. And when I started looking at my business that way, something shifted inside me. Because suddenly the goal wasn't simply to stay busy. The goal became to stay connected to the reason I started. When was the last time you reminded yourself why you started? Not the polished answer you give everyone else, not the one you put on your website, the real reason. The one that still makes your heart beat a little faster. The one that made you stay up late after working all day because you couldn't wait to try another idea. The one that made you believe maybe this could actually become something. Do you remember that version of yourself? I do. She was hopeful. She was excited. She was nervous. She didn't know nearly as much as she knows now, but she had something beautiful. She believed. Somewhere between then and now, many of us have picked up something we never intended to carry. Pressure. Pressure to keep up, pressure to post more, pressure to grow faster, pressure to do what everyone else is doing, pressure to chase every trend, pressure to never slow down, pressure to prove that we're successful. And here's what I've been wondering. What if the pressure isn't coming from our business? What if it's coming from the expectations that we placed on ourselves? Nobody is thinking about our business as much as we are. Isn't that funny? We spend hours worrying about whether someone noticed what we missed or that we didn't post. Meanwhile, they're trying to remember what they're making for dinner. We worry about everyone analyzing every move, and most people are just living their life. 100% it's the expectations, right? Sometimes the loudest expectations are the ones we've created ourselves, right? I should be farther. I should have more sales. I should have figured this out by now. According to who? Who made the timeline? Who decided where you should be at this point in your journey? Because if we're not careful, we'll spend so much time chasing an imaginary finish line that we completely miss the progress we've already made. And the thing is, what do they talk? They talk about goalposts, right? So you have a goalpost and you're trying to make it to that goalpost, right? So then you make it to that goalpost, or the goalpost keeps moving. You're constantly chasing, going after, or doing something, but that keeps moving. So you have to be present in where you are right now in order to get to that next big thing. But understand that there will always be another next big thing. One of the healthiest things I've ever done is stop measuring my journey against someone else's calendar, because their calling isn't my calling. Their business isn't my business. Their customers aren't my customers. Their gifts aren't my gifts. We are all gifted uniquely, every single one of us. So why would my timeline look exactly like theirs? It shouldn't, and yours shouldn't either. Comparison has convinced us that there's one right pace, one right way, one right strategy. But if there's one thing I've learned from talking to hundreds of business owners over the years is this: no two journeys look exactly alike. Some people grow quickly. Some people grow steadily. Some people pivot 3 times before they find their lane. Some people know exactly what they want from day one. Neither one is better. They're simply different. And that's actually good news, because it means you don't have to become someone else to succeed. You don't have to become a completely different person to succeed. You just have to become the best steward of what you've been given. And I love that word, steward, because a steward doesn't own everything. A steward faithfully manages what they've been entrusted with. Think about that. Your creativity, that's something you've been entrusted with. Your influence, entrusted. Your relationships, entrusted. Your customers, entrusted. Your time, entrusted. Even your business has been entrusted. When I look at it this way, my perspective changes. Instead of asking, how much can I squeeze into today? I've been asking, what's the best way to care for what I've been given today? And that feels different. It feels less frantic, less anxious, less driven by fear, and more rooted in purpose. Because purpose has a calming effect. Purpose reminds you that not every opportunity is your opportunity. Not every trend is your trend. Not every open door is your door. I don't know who needs to hear this today, but just because you can do something doesn't mean you're supposed to. And I've learned this lesson the hard way. There have been opportunities that looked exciting, ideas that sounded fun, projects that made perfect sense on paper. But every yes would have required me to say no to something else. And eventually, I realized every opportunity carries a cost. Not just money, attention, energy, focus, time. And if I keep saying yes to everything, eventually I'll have nothing left to give the things that matter most. I think that's one of the biggest mindset shifts I've experienced over the last few years. Success isn't about doing more, it's about becoming more intentional. It's about recognizing that every decision is casting a vote for the person you're becoming. Every habit, routine, response, priority, you're becoming someone. The question is the person you actually want to become what you are making a priority? Because one day your business will reflect that answer. not just in the products you sell, but in the culture you create, the way you treat people, the peace you carry, the integrity you model, the joy you bring into the room. People don't just buy products, they experience people. And long after they've forgotten the price they paid, they'll remember how you made them feel. That's why I don't believe the greatest asset in your business is your inventory or your equipment or your social media following. I think the greatest asset in your business is you, the healthy version of you, the growing version of you, the grounded version of you, the version of you that isn't constantly trying to prove something, but is simply committed to faithfully showing up every day with excellence, humility, and purpose. Because business growth isn't determined by numbers. It isn't determined by followers. I heard a creator say that algorithms don't work like that anymore. Opportunities don't work like that anymore. They're not looking at your following anymore. They're looking at your content. Is it valuable? Is what you're sharing valuable? Does it have value? Because businesses grow, platforms change, algorithms change, markets change. But character has a way of sustaining you through every season. And when you begin building from that place, you stop chasing busyness. You start pursuing significance. And there is a world of difference between the two. Right, Michelle? This is where I want to leave you before we wrap up today's conversation. I'm not trying to give you another checklist or give you 5 fancy first steps or a productivity system. Because if you've been listening from the beginning, you already know this was never really about productivity. Productivity is important. Planning is important. Time management is important. I'm not dismissing any of those things, but all of these are tools. Tools only become powerful when they're pointed in the right direction. You can have the best planner in the world, the best calendar, the best project management software, the best routines, the best systems, and still spend your life climbing the wrong ladder. That's why this conversation had to go deeper, because before we talk about managing our time, we have to decide what's worthy of our time. And before we talk about filling our calendar, we have to decide what deserves a place on it. Before we talk about building a business, we have to decide what kind of life we want the business to support. Because something I've realized, I don't want a business that constantly asks me to become someone I don't like. I don't want to become so rushed that I stop noticing people. I don't want to become so driven that I lose my compassion. I don't want to become so consumed with growth that I forget gratitude. I don't want to become so busy making a living that I forget to actually live. That's the picture that's been forming through this entire conversation. Busyness isn't the enemy. Misplaced busyness is. That's the difference. Being busy serving your customers because orders are coming in, that's a blessing. Being busy preparing a craft show you've prayed for, that's exciting. Being busy because your business is growing, that's a wonderful season. The problem isn't having full days. The problem is having full days that leave no room for what matters most. There's a phrase I've heard for years that says, don't major in the minors. I think that's exactly what we've been talking about today, because the minors are sneaky. They don't look wrong. They look responsible. They look productive. They look necessary. and many of them are. But if we're not careful, the minors quietly become the majors. The urgent replaces the important. The maintenance replaces the mission. The comfortable replaces the courageous. The familiar replaces the meaningful. And one day we wake up wondering why we're exhausted but not fulfilled. I want to encourage you with something. You don't have to overhaul your entire life this afternoon. In fact, I hope you don't, because massive overhauls usually last about a week. Then life shows up again. What I hope happens instead is much simpler. Tomorrow morning, before you open your email, before you look at social media, before you start answering everyone else's priorities, I hope you pause just for a minute and I hope you ask yourself one question. What is the most important thing I can do today that my future self will thank me for? Not 10 things, one, because that's what I've learned. One intentional decision repeated day after day quietly changes the direction of your life. Nobody notices it at first. It doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't create fireworks. But 6 months later, you look back and realize you've become a different person. Not because one big moment changed everything, because hundreds of small moments did. That's how habits work. That's how trust works. That's how relationships work. And believe it or not, that's how businesses work. And that's how character is formed. One decision repeated faithfully. And maybe that's the invitation today, not to become busier, not to squeeze more into your schedule, not to prove how hard you're working. Maybe the invitation is simply to become more intentional, to remember that every hour you're given is an investment. Every choice is planting something. Every day is shaping someone, and that someone is you. I don't know what your dream is. Maybe you're trying to open an Etsy shop. Maybe you're hoping to leave your 9 to 5 someday. Maybe you're trying to get your first sale. Maybe you're trying to get the thousandth sale. Maybe you're rebuilding after a difficult season. Maybe you're trying to remember why you started. Wherever you are, please hear me. Don't confuse slow growth with failure. Don't confuse quiet seasons with wasted seasons. Don't confuse faithful planting with falling behind. And please don't confuse being busy with being effective. They're not the same thing. I keep coming back to that. We talked about it throughout this whole conversation. When someone asked me, "How have you been?" my automatic answer was, "I've been so busy." And if someone asks me that question today, after spending this week wrestling with everything we've talked about, I think my answer would be different. I don't think I'd tell them how full my calendar is. I don't think I'd measure my week by how many boxes I checked. I think I'd stop for a second, I'd smile, and answer the question actually asked, "How have you been?" You know what? I've been growing. I've been learning. I've been challenged. I've been stretched. I've made mistakes. I've had some wins. I've had a few moments where I questioned myself. I've had moments where God gently redirected me. I've had moments where I realized I was spending too much energy on things that didn't deserve it. I've had moments where I remembered why I started. And honestly, I think that's a much better answer. Because when this journey is over, I don't believe anyone is going to remember how busy you were. They're going to remember what we built, the lives we touched, the people we encouraged, the integrity we carried, the love we showed, the difference we made. So as you go into this weekend and week, build something. not just something people can see. Build trust, build consistency, build wisdom, build courage, build relationships, build a business you're proud of, build a life that reflects your values, build a habit your future is going to depend on. And while you're building all of those things, don't forget that God is building something too. He's building you. Sometimes through the victories, sometimes through the waiting, sometimes through the disappointments, sometimes through the doors that don't open, sometimes through the ones that do. Every season has a purpose if you're willing to let it teach us. So keep planting, keep showing up, keep choosing what matters over what merely feels urgent. Keep taking the next faithful step, because one day you'll look back and realize that what felt like ordinary, unnoticed days were actually the days that built an extraordinary life. And I don't know about you, but that's the kind of busy I want. The kind that's not measured by how much I did, but by how faithfully I invested what I was given. And now that's profitable. You know, every week we finish one of these conversations, I always ask myself the same question. If someone only remembers one thing from today, what do I hope it is? And this week, I think it's this. Your value is not measured by how busy you are. Your calendar doesn't determine your worth. Your exhaustion isn't proof of your effectiveness. And your future isn't built by doing more things. It's built by doing the right things consistently. If today's conversation caused you to pause for just a minute and honestly look at where your time, your energy, and your attention have been going, then I think you've accomplished exactly what we set out to do. Not because I want you to leave here feeling guilty. I don't. Guilt doesn't produce lasting change. Awareness does. My hope is that tomorrow morning you'll wake up with a different lens. Not asking how much I can get done today, but asking what matters most today. Because when you begin asking better questions, you begin making better decisions. And better decisions repeated over time create a completely different life. I also want to encourage you with something. If today made you realize you've been spending too much time on the wrong things, don't beat yourself up. We've all done it. I have, more times than I care to count. That's one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation, not because I've mastered this, I haven't, but because I'm learning it right alongside you. We're all growing, we're all figuring it out. We're all trying to become better stewards of the gifts, the opportunities, and the time we've been given. So give yourself some grace, then make one different choice, not 20, just one, because one intentional decision becomes another intentional decision tomorrow, then another, then another. You know where I'm going. And before long, you're no longer living by accident. You're living on purpose. That's how meaningful businesses are built. That's how meaningful lives are built. One faithful day at a time. Before we go, I want to say thank you. Thank you for spending this time with me every week. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. Whether you've been here since the very first Real Talk or this is the first time we've ever met, I don't take your time for granted. There are a lot of voices you could listen to. The fact that you've chosen to spend this time with me means more than you know. If today's conversation encouraged you, challenged you, or made you think of someone else who needs to hear it, would you do me a favor? Will you share it? Send it to a friend? Post it on your page? You never know who needs the reminder, and that they're not alone. And if you're looking for a community of people who are building businesses while encouraging one another instead of competing with one another, I'd love to invite you to join us in the Crafted Collab Network. That's exactly why I created it. It's a place where creators, makers, and small business owners can ask questions, share ideas, celebrate wins, work through challenges, and continue conversations just like this one. because none of us were meant to build alone. I'll make sure the information is linked below if you'd like to learn more. And next week, I want to continue this conversation in a way that I think every entrepreneur needs to hear. We're going to talk about something that has stolen joy from more business owners than almost anything else. Our next Real Talk is supporting without comparing. How do we genuinely celebrate someone else's success without secretly feeling like we're falling behind? How do we encourage others while still protecting our own confidence? How do we build community instead of competition? I have a feeling that's going to be a conversation a lot of us need. So I hope you'll join me. And until then, keep creating, keep learning, keep showing up, keep planting seeds, keep choosing purpose over pressure. And remember, you don't have to be busy to be productive. You don't have to do everything. You just have to faithfully do what matters most. Have an amazing weekend and an amazing week, my friends. God bless you, and I'll see you next Friday for another Real Talk.